Hello, my name is Elizabeth Ding, and I'm gonna be answering the question of how does anti-Muslimness exist in our world? So, I think this is a very straightforward question, and I would like to answer it as anti-Muslimness exists everywhere and anywhere throughout the world. I don't believe that there's just one area where this is apparent. But I think it's predominant in society, systems, and schools. And I feel as if in diverse communities, the people within them are more accepting of differences, as in, well, as compared to non-diverse communities. I find it hard to believe that the majority are open-minded because of the lack of diversity, which then can impair cultural awareness and create this bias. And being in a diverse environment can open new perspectives. And it would lead someone to revise their own beliefs. And that person would be essentially building their respect, empathy, and celebrating differences and similarities within multiple communities. But this also brings up the idea of many people want to be close-minded. And I don't really have to talk about whether or not they're in non-diverse communities or just diverse communities because closed-minded people are everywhere and they exist everywhere. They are against considering new ideas and believe that they're righteous ideals because they fear the unknown. They find comfort and familiarity, or they just have a god-awful ego. Near the beginning of the course, we went through what critical Muslim studies entail. This is a relatively new idea as there's no singular definition. And in my perspective, to learn about CMS, the general public needs to broaden their understanding and explore decolonial thinking, which is problematic. This is problematic as it's not the only other world problem that needs a fixture in the system. For example, anti-blackness, which has been and is a popular topic that's being spoken about. A source that was given from Pluto Journals reoriented a forum of critical Muslim studies. The purpose of this journal was to focus on the study of CMS or the existence of CMS. So near the end of the source, this is where my quote is coming from. Um, it writes that critical Muslim studies is an ongoing series of reflections on the possibility of comprehending the world by a relationship that provocanizes the West and the rest, differences that are found both in Western episteme and the world that it made. The idea of CMS is directing its objective correlating to understand relationships and detecting the reproduction of colonial and war imperialism reasoning. In other words, the journal is trying to delink and rethink. And the goal is to understand that the world can be without interference of Western idealism, or trying to find a world without the interference. And when we talk about CMS, we have to talk about Orientalism. From a simple Google search, Orientalism is an art movement that is a representation of Asia in a stereotypical way that attributes to a colonialist perspective. And even in the definition, you can see where anti-Muslimness came from. I believe that anti-Muslimness came from a general classification. Just like in the 18th and 19th century, Orientalism remains powerful because it shapes not just how people in the West view the East, but also how they view themselves. For the Muslim people that are either born or raised in the West or received a Western education, it seems that it's so conflicting to look at self-identity. And there seems to be an impression that the Western ideologies that have progressed over the course of centuries are not in favor of cultures, religions, beliefs, etc., outside the norm. So just non-Europeans. When looking back at history, I think that it's safe to say that everything in our world has revolved around social hierarchy and social class. Orient Orientalism being a Western viewpoint to uplift Europeans to the top of the social hierarchy is another course of action in the justification of racism and power tripping of the Orients. And I think anti-Muslimness is or was already pre-existing before this term came out. And this was just this term was just to uplift racial views. And I think it just transcended more people into being anti-Muslim or anti-everything else because this view was placed on such a massive audience. And I think this is where it just rose to stardom at that point. And when we talk about anti-Muslimness, I think it's important to bring in intersectionality as it is a way to broaden people's current views. The YouTube video produced by Kate Anderson shows Kimberly Kenshaw talk about her analogy to explain what intersectionality means or is.
Many years ago, I began to use the term intersectionality to deal with the fact that many of our social justice problems like racism and sexism are often overlapping, creating multiple levels of social injustice.
In a way, intersectionality is not just a concept, but a way of thinking about issues in our society from different lenses. It is an idea that needs recognition and should be utilized for change. And I feel like if people were more aware of intersectionality than thinking, oh, these people are just dealing with hate crimes because of their race, etc., they begin to realize that almost everyone in different communities is dealing with this somewhat similar problems as the system has created such failure in understanding the people that it serves. And the system in reality has done everything to help with the classification, undermining values and oppressing people of color. Another topic I wanted to talk about that surrounds the complex conceptions of Muslim identity and belonging in schools. I would say that everybody believes that education is a way to broaden lessons, but in truth, the lenses are fixated on summarizing complexities. Though each school differs from one another, they are similar in summarizing the many courses within within a short time frame to understand these central ideas. In a reading provided by Natasha Merchant, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, Shia Ismaili Muslim girls negotiate Islam in the classroom. A case was conducted by girl students within Shia Nizar Ismaili Muslim community saying, ultimately, the study revealed a paradox of representation and participation for these students who found their practice and interpretation of Islam silenced in the classroom curriculum and yet felt obliged to defend Islam and educate others against stereotypes of Muslims. And from this quote, or just the overall understanding of it, there is a limited understanding of Islam itself and the superficial definition of Muslim, I'm so sorry. It is seemingly unclear how the schools would create a central idea that students would understand. Schools as of now are not only reinforcing the alienation of Orients, but they're reinforcing the misconceptions spread by the public. From the text, it seems as though schools are fortifying ignorance even though they promote school as a gain of intelligence. At the end of the writing, Natasha Merchant poses a really interesting question. And this is, can a more inclusive and holistic curriculum on Islam reduce prejudice and create spaces of belonging for students, for all students? For this question, I would add concerns over what types of regulations would be placed on these curriculums, what topics would it cover, or would this type of curriculum could be considered as a requirement? Would there be a difference in impact on where the curriculum is set? Because states and school districts vary on what is taught in schools. When forming these concerns, I wonder how and in what ways would the school's curriculum would alter from now and then. The complex conceptions of Muslim identity and belonging in schools need to be brought up as great concerns. The education that focuses on too much generalization apart from its own history needs to be decentralized a bit more just to be more inclusive to the minorities that reside there. And I find this so ironic that it's not more inclusive. But to really answer this question, I do think a more inclusive and holistic curriculum on Islam will and can reduce prejudice and create spaces for all students. But finding its place in school has its difficulty depending on the location. So this is where we come back to the question again. And it's how does anti-Muslimness exist in our world? All in all, I think my answer is still somewhat the same as the beginning. I believe that anti-Muslimness exists everywhere, past, present, and future. And I think that even if we were to advance to a more diverse society that accepts each other's differences more freely, there will always be anti-Muslimness. And I still think that's due to narrow-minded people. Sadly, anti-Muslimness is a world issue that will never find its solution. I think it will find close to a solution, but I don't think that it will resolve completely. And I think that that's fine. Thank you so much.